Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Jack Simpson podcast. On today's episode, we have on Jared Maynard. Welcome.
Thank you, Jack. Really excited to be here, man. And thanks for the invite. I've been looking forward to this I think I've been planning it for about a week, and it's been a highlight.
Yeah, 100%. I always get a bit giddy when I've got new guests on. I've had a bit of a recent drop in being able to do this with people, as you know, my listeners will be aware of. So yeah, it's lovely to get on. I love chatting to people. I love, getting on the podcast and having new experiences with people like yourself that are, inspirational and as people will find out as you tell your story. So do you want to give us a bit of a background on yourself? You're growing up, where you're from, and just a bit about yourself, please.
Totally. So I'm a physiotherapist. I'm a strength coach, powerlifter. I'm over here in Canada, Great White North. And yeah, growing up, I was born in Ottawa, the nation's capital. And growing up, I was actually a pretty chunky kid. I was watching some of your episodes before we hopped on, and you've shared about your own journey. So maybe there's some parallels here. But growing up, yeah, not athletic, didn't have much in the way of confidence. Like some of the early memories that I have of being at school was being out at recess and uh, playing games like either wall ball or like little mini hockey sticks or whatever. And especially for the games where we had to pick teams, I just knew I was going to be the second last or the last one picked because just I couldn't hang. I wasn't very good at stuff. So like confidence wise, that took a toll on me as like a, 6, 7, 8 year old kid and growing older than that. And got bullied a bit for my weight, as kids are prone to do. Kids can be pretty cruel in that sense.
Yeah.
But my parents tried to find some sort of outlet, athletic outlet that would fit me. Tried a few things, nothing really stuck. Tried tennis, tried basketball. Um, it was all fine, but nothing that I really took to until we tried martial arts. And I know you're a BJJ practitioner. That's on my hit list. Kung Fu was what I started with,
Okay.
and it was awesome. Like I never grew up watching martial arts movies. Actually, sorry, it's true. Never grew up watching martial arts movies. Big Power Rangers fan. Uh,
Same.
to the point where I was upset with my parents for not naming me Jason after the Red Ranger. So getting into Kung Fu was really cool and really did a lot confidence wise. Like physically, it was a regular physical outlet. So that was about the time I started to hit a growth spurt too. Started to lean out a little bit, get a little taller. But it was the first thing physically or sports wise that I like really took to. And yeah, past that, you know, getting into like 13, 14-year-old age range, getting into high school here. The movie Remember the Titans?
No.
It's a football movie with Denzel Washington and a few other actors. It's a Disney movie. Really
No.
good.
Okay, I might give it a what. I've got kids, so I'll get it on the hit list.
There you go. So we used to have family movie night, and every Friday night we just gather around, watch a movie. So we watched Remember the Titans, and my dad was the only one who had played football, American football, not the actual football. Um, so he every time that there was a sequence of them playing the games, he'd have to pause it and explain what was happening because we'd be like, "Dad, are we happy about that? What actually just happened?"
Hmm.
Um, but because of that movie, I really wanted to play American football. So that was what I got into next. Did a summer camp, went out for the football team for my second year in high school, and played for 3 seasons. Never very good, but damn, I worked hard.
So what position
Uh,
did you play?
what's that?
What position?
I played tight end the first season. The second season I played, I was on the offensive line as a guard. I had no business being a guard. I don't know what the coach was thinking. I was about 165 pounds. I forget what that is kilos wise, but just not big enough to be a guard.
Right,
But
165 pounds is 10 and a bit stone, I think.
yeah,
11 stone. Yeah. Right, okay. Okay. I don't know anything about NFL or American football.
Just if you imagine refrigerators lining up on either side of the ball, and then you had like a
little
slightly
guy.
oversized lampstand. I was the
Yeah,
lampstand.
yeah. I understand the 165 pounds, obviously, with the weight categories at the
Oh,
UFC.
totally.
I know
No, I
there isn't
mean,
a 165,
good.
but yeah. I get the size difference. You're on about like a heavyweight in the UFC against like no, Charles Oliveira's bigger than that. Like Volkanovski. Yeah,
There you go.
that's a pretty big size system. Yeah. So what? So did you stop kung fu and then start playing American football? Do you just? I'm assuming you just call it football. Do you call
We
it?
do here.
Yeah. You're not going to call it American football.
Yeah, I did. I stopped kung fu. It was because we, as a family, went down to see my dad's family in, excuse me, Trinidad and Tobago. So we left for a trip that lasted about 6 weeks. So that interrupted my usual routine of going to kung fu. And then at that point, I had also not stopped. I lost a little bit of interest. Chalk it up to being a 13-year-old teenage boy with like just wanting to do the next thing that was new. So yeah, that led to the break there.
Right. So after football, what were you on to then?
After football, I mean, I played that all the way through high school, and then when high school finished, or sorry, when the football season finished, I needed something to do because I wasn't on the field at practice for 2 hours, 5 days a week. And I think the second season, or maybe even the first season I played, I wanted to start lifting weights just to get a little bit stronger for football. So my parents had some weights, and they had like do you remember the Total Gym? It was like a cable machine. Chuck Norris was like the spokesman for it.
Yeah. We don't have that stuff over here. Like Chuck Norris has never done anything over. How old are you, by the way?
33.
Okay, yeah, I'm 34, so we're similar age. So no, that's not US stuff. Isn't over here. Not really. I don't recall anything like that. Is it? Are you saying like where it's got everything on it? We can do like a pull down and you can do like a lot of different exercises.
Kind of. The Total Gym, they marketed it as being different because it was like a cable. The whole idea was you could do different exercises while you lay it on this bench and then use the cable attachments to move your own body weight. So kind of like a universal machine, but you're just sliding up and down on the machine.
Oh, right. I don't think I remember that, no. But anyway,
I bring it up.
Cool.
Wasn't anything special, but my parents had that in their basement and some weights. So yeah, just started lifting to try to get a little bit bigger and stronger. And then I kept up with that when football was done. And that rolled over into university for me. Just really trying to get bigger, look better. And eventually at some point after university, around 2012, I guess it would have been for me, I wanted to try to compete in natural bodybuilding. And yeah, I hired a coach, started working on that. Never competed. Just wasn't really a good fit for me, specifically because of how much focus was needed on the nutrition to get lean enough to compete. I got pretty lean, under 10% body fat, but to take it further and actually step on stage, which it was pushing it past what I could actually handle. Yeah.
Okay.
So after that, shifted to powerlifting because that's what caught my attention. And instead of needing to be so focused on the nutrition component, and instead of having to step on stage and have judges tell me, well, your delts aren't as good as the next guy, or, his legs look better than yours. Powerlifting, there's still some subjectivity, but it's more objective. Did you lift the weight to standard? Yes or no? So that was intriguing.
Yeah, and that's my ball game, that is.
What's that?
It's my ball game, that is, 100%. I train to lift as heavy as possible.
Totally. I mean, that was fun and exhilarating then. It still is now.
Mm.
And yeah, I got bit by the bug. I started training for that in 2014, competed for the first time in 2016, and been sticking with it ever since.
Nice. So how did you make the transition then from, just be when you were sort of just gym going? Like you said, obviously you went from the bodybuilding to obviously weightlifting. When you're transitioning through that, what did you change many exercises, or were you just changing the rep range and obviously the weight size?
It was mostly, yeah, mostly the rep ranges and the weight on the bar. Because even when I was trying to train initially just to get bigger and stronger, and then for the bodybuilding focus, I was still back squatting, I was still barbell benching, deadlifting. That had always been part of it for me, kind of from the get-go.
Yeah.
So it was more, yeah, just trying to refine the technique a bit more so I could get more comfortable under heavier weights, doing fewer reps, while still having a bit of bodybuilding flavor in there uh, to an extent. Because
Yeah.
as a remnant from the bodybuilding days, trying to get so lean, I spent too many years trying to still diet down, even after transitioning into powerlifting. I'm 5'11" and a half, 183 centimeters. So I really didn't have much business being trying to stay at like 181 pounds as a powerlifter. Just so that was something to navigate and kind of get used to.
Okay. I'm pretty sure 183 is 6 foot.
Yeah. Well, excellent. A little disparity between what the doctor says and what my license says, but close enough.
No, it is. I'm 180 and I'm 5'11, so you've got to be 6 foot because it's 2.5 centimeters in an inch.
And
But
then
anyway, so what you just said then is exactly what I'm going through at the minute. I'm when I first started back at the gym, I was training like that, where I was like trying to get like bigger looking. And now I'm into the powerlifting now. Like I'm doing 5 to 8 reps, 5 to 8 rep range. But I'm still eating quite lean, and I keep doing it. Like today at the gym, I felt super weak, like brutal. I put you kilograms or no, your pounds 80, so 225. So I put 100 kilograms on the bar, and usually I can chuck that up for 8 reps, no sweat. I struggled to get 5 up today, and I was fuming with myself. But I just had no energy. Like I double scooped my pre-workout, and it would just nothing. I just feel so flat after like the 3rd rep on every exercise. I was just like, I'm dead here.
yeah, same for me. Where I'd imagine we probably share this in most competitors, whether BJJ, powerlifting, whatever. You push yourself, you try to get better.
Mm.
And looking back on it, I could say, well, yeah, no wonder I wasn't getting as strong as I wanted. But in the moment where I'd slap whatever weight on the bar and it was like mad that it wouldn't move,
Yeah.
that was just a source of frustration. But yeah, the nutrition played into it for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it does definitely. I mean, I've always said I would rather enjoy life than have to, like, do you know what I mean? I'd rather have flavour and stuff in my food and get down or, lift the weight I'm aiming for just over a longer period of time. Like, I'm always going to train because I don't want to be a little fatsy like I was a few years back. And yeah, people get annoyed with me for saying that I used to be fat, and I'm like, well, I was fat, so I don't know what you want me to do about that.
Yeah. So was I. Just kind of how it is.
Yeah. So right. So the reason you came across me, as we've got to that point now, is because you contracted HLH. Do you want to explain to everyone what that is, and begin your story? And like I said to you before before we started, I've got a few questions on the HLH.
Totally. Yeah. So HLH is an autoimmune disease. For anybody keeping track on their bingo cards at home, it stands for hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. Yeah. A little bit of a mouthful.
I got that one.
Nailed it. You're crushing it for 2024 already. So yeah, it's a situation where the body's immune system starts attacking healthy cells, especially red blood cells. And we'll talk a bit more about it, but sometimes it can be genetic. It's called the primary version. Mine was secondary, so I didn't have any genetic influence. Uh, but it can happen after either an infection, a sort of cancer, or a different autoimmune condition. And mine happened after an infection. But like really what happened for me in January of 2023, it was January 2nd, because we had just seen my parents on New Year's Day. And my wife and my daughters and I, we've got three girls. We went to see them, came back. The next day I started feeling a little unwell, just felt like a head cold kind of starting. And I didn't think too much of it because my daughters and my wife all started getting the same sort of symptoms. But then, fast forward about a week, they were better and I was getting worse. Um, Over about 3 weeks was when things really started to go downhill, where it started with the head cold symptoms. And then I got insomnia, where I couldn't sleep for more than an hour at best per night. Um, Fever, chills. I'd wake up sweating, take off layers, go back to sleep, wake up absolutely frigid. My lymph nodes all through my neck, they swelled like they'd never swollen before. It felt like a little mountain range as you run your fingers along it. Um, and it got to the point where my wife looked at me and she's like, "You're yellow." Like my skin tone had gotten yellow because my liver was starting to fail,
Yeah.
which we later found out. So we had gone to a smaller hospital at some point in the mix, got diagnosed with mononucleosis, um, got a sleeping medication for the insomnia, but things kept getting worse. So January 23rd was the day before my eldest two daughters are twins, day before their birthday, their fifth birthday, and went into the larger hospital, heart racing, like up near 180, 190 beats per minute, blood pressure through the roof. And they admitted me. And within 6 days, I was in the ICU on life support because things just got bad real fast.
So, excuse me. Um, so when you got rushed to the hospital, what did they first think it was?
They really didn't know. My memory of the hospital, the second hospital, the bigger one, was excuse me, went into the emergency room. Uh, they knew something was very wrong because they could see that my skin was yellow, my oxygen levels in my blood, they were lower too. So they gave me like a nasal cannula, some supplemental oxygen to breathe. But then it was this process of trying to get the ER doctors to do their initial tests, calling in other specialists to come in and consult to figure out what might be going on. I think, and my memory is hazy at best because I was starting to go into like delirium because of what was
Right.
going on. And then once I got to the ICU, they sedated me. So I went through various stages of like sedation, and apparently the medication that sedates you can make some people really chilled out or very paranoid. I was the paranoid version. So I'm piecing a lot of this back through my wife and my parents actually. But they had to do blood tests. They sent me for at least a couple of CTs and X-rays. The way that they really confirmed the HLH was through a bone marrow biopsy. So took a little drill, had to drill into the back of my hip bone and take a sample and send that to the lab. Um, I was also bleeding. So what do they call it? It was, I'm forgetting the proper term, but it was like hemorrhagic bleeding in my larynx, like near my vocal cords. And then when the doctor went to do the bone marrow biopsy, drilling into my hip, it was hard for her to do that because like I was just bleeding profusely. So they had to give me a bunch of blood transfusions and stuff like that. And it was a mess. But eventually with the testing, they landed on the diagnosis.
Yeah, it sounds brutal. Like the biopsy. Yeah, just oof, that's I can feel it.
I'd have a second one in June of this past year. Uh, the results of that one confirmed the HLH isn't here anymore. It's all clear. A little spoiler, but I was fully awake for that one, and Oh, it sucked. Would not recommend if you could avoid it.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. Well, I've never had it done, but it just, yeah, I can feel it. My hips are hurting.
Yeah.
So what was the treatment process like for you?
So the typical treatment process, there's a protocol. I think it was originally made in 1994, updated in 2004. It's a combination, and this is for secondary HLH. It's a combination of chemotherapy, corticosteroids, antibiotics for any infections, sometimes monoclonal antibodies. The thing about it for me, when we began treatment, we knew what it was. I was in the ICU at this point. Um, is that I was in such bad shape. Like liver was failing, kidneys were failing, my spleen was huge, um, and things were on the decline. So I was sick enough where the doctors couldn't actually give me the full dose of the chemotherapy. It's this catch 22 of I probably need the chemo to get better,
Mm.
but chemo itself, obviously being toxic and hard on the body, can only handle so much at a time. So that's usually how it looks. Um, for people who have primary HLH with the genetic component, it's usually newborns or infants, that needs a bone marrow transplant to actually stand a chance of being cured. Sometimes a bone marrow transplant can be used for secondary. We never had to do that, and touch wood, don't have to, but we got that process going after. But that's kind of the decision that we were looking at.
Blimey. Um, so did you have any sort of anything happen to you that was sort of outside the norm at all, or was your process pretty straightforward?
Not, I wouldn't say so much straightforward, and particularly because of how sick I was. So in the ICU, on, like, when I say life support, just for anybody who doesn't know what that all looks like. So I was on a ventilator. They had to stick a tube down my throat to help me breathe first. Thing about that is they only usually keep that in for a certain period of time. I think it's like around 14 days, because then the worry is that it'll impact like safety or the throat musculature, things like that. Might also be infection control, but because I needed it longer, they had to do a tracheotomy. So like punch the hole in my windpipe, my trachea, and then connect the ventilator to that. So I had a tube. I got pictures of it too, but tube in my throat, machine breathing for me. Needed dialysis because my kidneys were failing. So I think it was a daily occurrence or multiple times a day for at least a week or two. I have no recollection of it, but because I was sedated, but my parents and my wife told me afterwards.
So
So
was your obviously with the weeks span from it, from it kicking off to being at this stage, is that considered quite aggressive then for
I think so.
secondary?
Yeah, I think so. And talking to my doctors at the hospital who also consulted with specialists elsewhere, hospitals in Toronto, and then also a city called Hamilton around here. Uh, HLH is rare. I forget what the stats are, but it's rare enough that we don't actually have a whole lot of good hard data, especially for adults who present with it. So it's really kind of going off of case studies of other people who've been documented who have it or was suspected to have it, and trying to like figure out as best you can how to treat it. But from what
So
I've gathered, yeah, mine was pretty aggressive and fast moving.
so yours, obviously that's a not for yourself obviously, but it being that aggressive is it obviously it is out of the norm. Did they mention anything about that, like how aggressive it was, like that it was?
Not not so much to me. It, or the extent to which they mentioned it was like, yeah, this happened fast. One of my doctors, my hematologist, who she's phenomenal. She described all this as like no genetic component. It was a really, really unlucky hand, uh, sort of a medical fluke, is how she put it. And she, you know, being a healthcare provider myself, I'm always kind of on the lookout for other healthcare professionals who just sort of say stuff and dismiss something. that never came across that way from her. It was just like, you had no way of knowing this was going to happen. You had no control over this. This just sucks. And it happened and it went down hard and fast. But yeah,
Yeah. So how long did your recovery take?
in some ways it's still going on. But when I was admitted to the hospital January 23rd, I stayed in there for about a month and a half. Or sorry, excuse me, 3.5 months. May 1st is when I was discharged. Um, but getting out of the hospital to go home, I was still bedbound. I was still very weak and frail. So yeah, 3.5 months in the hospital, another month and a half of very minimal stuff at home, mostly just being bedbound, and then very slowly starting to exercise again. And I'm talking about like just sitting up and standing up from the side of the bed, uh, very, very basic rehab exercises, and then gradually getting back to the point where I could get into the gym, touch a barbell, and again, another spoiler, where I'm at now, thankfully in a better place, but preparing for the first powerlifting meet back since this all happened. That'll be for May 25th.
So is there anything in your life now that HLH affects at all, or are you, completely good to go?
There are a few things. So, especially over the up until this point, and there's actually a wound that's just closed up on my leg. Because in the ICU, on top of the challenges from HLH, uh, there were a whole bunch of infections and weird medical things going on. Uh, we don't even really know exactly what it is, but there's an infection in one of my legs, traveled up the inside thigh, through my groin to the down the other leg, and then it turned into a wound, an open wound on my left side. And uh, also because I was on life support for 5 weeks, I couldn't move much. The nurses and staff tried to move me around, but when you lie in bed for long enough or lie still, it doesn't actually take terribly long, but you can start to develop pressure ulcers, just break down to the skin and tissues. So I had one of those on my tailbone. Those two wounds took a very long time to heal. Had a lot of nerve pain, uh, odd bouts of swelling, like a lot of swelling on my hips to the point where it interfered with me walking. And we got it checked out, but no real answers. Um, and well, if anybody's watching, I've got a skin graft on my arm because in the ICU, when there was an IV, they were trying to give me medication, and it didn't go into the vein, some malfunction or mistake, and the medicine stayed in the arm, and it destroyed the skin. So we had to get a skin graft there, and I lost 40 pounds in the ICU because I was too sick to eat or even really receive nutrition. They had a tube going down to my stomach, but because I couldn't eat, my body needed something to sustain itself. And that something was a lot of the muscle that I had built for the years of training for football and then in the just getting bigger and then bodybuilding and powerlifting. Yeah, so it came in pretty handy in a way I never thought it would.
Yeah, definitely. So what are there any long-term effects that you will experience like continuously for the rest of your life?
There's a lot of uncertainty there. So I have some some damage. I don't know if it's from the HLH or the chemotherapy, but my smell and taste is really affected. I can't smell much. On one hand, it's a positive because if I go, got young kids, stuff happens. If something's really stinky, it doesn't bother me right now. Uh, but that's one thing that it may slowly come back over time. You know, nerve damage is a funny thing like that. Same thing with my feet, a lot of numbness and tingling, which may improve. It seems to have improved a little bit, but it's still a really slow process. And I asked one of the specialists what the chances of this happening again are. And he said, based on the research, 20 to 30% chance of recurrence at some point. But he said, looked at it the other way, 70 to 80% chance that it doesn't. So it just means that we have to be vigilant because I'm still technically immunocompromised, I think, just from the chemotherapy and all that. So when I get sick, something we have to watch for. And I had a couple bouts of pneumonia even over the last like 6 months, which actually affected my vision. I have an existing eye condition that's been affecting or that existed before all this.
Right.
But I won the rare disease lottery twice. Not a lottery I wanted to play, but got lucky. So yeah.
So when did you once you were out of the hospital? When did you start? What was the time frame between getting out of hospital and lifting your first weight, like serious weight?
Probably would have been so got out of the hospital May 1st. It wasn't until about a month and a half later that I went down to the gym. I've got a gym in my basement and was able to even touch the barbell. Even that was like a week or two before I could hold on to the barbell. And that was just the bar, with no weight on it, that sort of thing. So I'd say the time that I actually felt like I was quote unquote back to just regular powerlifting training, nowhere near my old weights, mind you, but that was probably September. I'd actually say closer to November, December. So whatever that math works out to.
So 5 6 months. Yeah, right. Crikey. And so, and what gave you the? So obviously, I'd never heard of HLH before this week. I've done a bit of my research on it, but obviously, I'm not. I'm no doctor. So with your once you got out of the hospital and you were, you lead up to you lifting that weight. What did your day to day look like? Like when you first got out of the hospital, was it like the wife at home? You had a carer 24/7. What did that look like, and how did that affect, I suppose, the marriage?
My wife, her name's Ashley. She is just beyond rock star level at this point. Because not only was she my caretaker at home, and we tried to with my doctors in the hospital, they knew I wanted to get home. Like I was just beyond homesick.
Yeah.
For Ashley and for my daughters. But we also wanted to make sure that I didn't go home too early because my wife just physically couldn't be like a full-time nurse. So we're trying to get me home as quick as I could, but to the point where Ashley didn't need to be lifting me, carrying me, that sort of thing. So yeah, when I got home, I was in bed pretty well all day. Um, some washroom breaks, but even then that was tough. Like, just a reality. I had urinals, just portable urinals by the bedside and a bunch of hand sanitizer because even just standing up and using a walker, like a rolling walker, is what I had to use to get to the bathroom, which I don't know. Anyone could get there from my bedroom in about 5 steps, but that was a trek for me.
Yeah.
So Ashley would make sure I had food and drink for the day. She would be the one who would help me get up, and we'd have to give a good lead time to get to the doctor's office and do blood work and all the appointments that followed. We had nurses who would come and help change my dressings on my wounds and stuff like that. But for a good 3 4 weeks, it was just like me in bed. Occasionally, I'd venture down to the bottom or the main floor of the house, but only for a few minutes because my nausea was just awful and overall endurance, both from the chemo. So yeah, she stepped up.
So how were the twins?
They surprised me. Um, as anyone could probably imagine, this was really hard for everybody, but especially for kids. So my twins were 5, and Ashley started telling them while I was in the hospital what had gone on, trying to prepare them for coming to see me. And because of chemotherapy, if anyone's just listening, I've got a full beard. The chemo had all of my hair fall out, beard, eyebrows. I had a couple of eyelashes hanging on, but I looked extremely different on top of, losing a bunch of weight. So they came for the first visit when I was still in the ICU. There's a great organization in the hospital that organized activities for children because the hospital is a scary place, especially the ICU
Yeah.
with machines and all that. Uh, my twins' names are Mary Claire and Ellie. So Ellie was the first one. Well, both of them, all three of them, my twins and my youngest, were overwhelmed when they first came in. So they went off to the side, nice quiet area to do their activities. And then Ellie was the first one to come back. She had her mask on and she looked timid, but she was willing to come over to where I was sitting in the chair. She held my hand. She gave me a cuddle. I lost it. Just I started crying and really weeping just because I missed them so much. And I knew it was hard for her. Uh, and then I think the next visit, all three of them came over, gave me a hug, all that stuff. So they surprised me with how perceptive they were and how willing they were to kind of take that step to either meet me that first day or come visit me. And I think over time, it was more and more clear that it was still me. It was still dad, but dad just looked very different right now.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to someone who is newly diagnosed with HLH?
I mean, first, just my heart would go out to anybody because it's a terrible and devastating thing, especially because it's rare and can be so aggressive and move so fast. It's hard. I've actually, since deciding to share more of my story, I've been touched to have a number of people, some of whom have HLH or other people who have other autoimmune diseases, reaching out and asking if I have any advice. And it's difficult because even though I had one and currently don't, I'm still not an expert, especially when it comes to autoimmune issues. So, I mean, one is, and I know it's going to be different depending on where people live, but hopefully my hope would be they have some access to healthcare providers at least who are willing to listen, pay attention, not just dismiss symptoms or concerns as whatever. Um, it's always easier to say than to do too, but advocating for yourself, if what the doctors think or say doesn't quite make sense to you, really trying to push for, I don't know, more testing or at least to be heard. My wife especially was forced into being that advocate because when I went under in the ICU, she had to do it. But yeah, hopefully, you know, voicing what's on your mind, even if it seems silly to you, it's worth saying at least. Just because in the world of HLH or autoimmune stuff, it can be so variant and like so weird and scary that at least understand or making sure that you're heard or as best you can helps. Um, and just hopefully leaning on friends, family, spouses, people who are around to give some level of support, because that's another thing that helped me get through it. I don't think I would have made it through the worst of it without as much support and encouragement as I had.
Yeah, definitely. So, is there any resources or support groups that you found helpful?
One that I came across recently and tells you how new it is. I can't quite remember the proper name, but I know there is a database of uh, people who have had HLH, researchers trying to gather more information so that they can serve people who are affected by it better. Um, I'll try to
Is
find that name and maybe kick it to you. And if you want to put it in show notes or anything like that, we can do that.
is the database, is that just in the US then, is it?
I don't know. I'm not sure if it's just US based, North American, or if it's global. Yeah, I'd have to check.
Okay.
But the first person I came across, her name's Mandy. Unfortunately, she and her husband lost their daughter to HLH, but Brooks Battle is the Instagram handle. And you can go check her out. But she was one of the first people who, followed me and reached out. And I've been really surprised by how many people have reached out to me or I've come across who, again, it's bittersweet, unfortunately have been touched or influenced by this disease. But it's one of those things where if you've been through a similar kind of suffering, there's sort of a bond that you form pretty quick with other people like that. So yeah, that's what I found.
So how did you stay positive and manage your health? And how? Well, obviously we know how you manage your health now. But yeah, how did you stay positive?
I didn't is the answer. And it was hard. It was really hard, especially in the early days when I had woken up, came out of sedation in the ICU, and we started to move out of the ICU and to lesser levels of care in the hospital. I started to be aware of what was going on, started hearing what had just gone on, started looking at myself, still being bedbound, and just feeling like I woke up in a different body. My arm was or the skin graft again. It was all black and like leathery skin from that medicine that had killed off the stuff. So my arm didn't feel like mine. It just whole world changed. Uh, Another thing was because I was had a ventilator and couldn't eat, speak, swallow for 5 weeks. Something we never think about, but the throat musculature that's responsible for those things all atrophied, shriveled up. So I couldn't eat or drink uh, for months because there was risk of me choking on it and like potentially dying from it. So anyway, the one particular memory that stands out the most is my wife was in the hospital visiting me. We had gone down to the speech language pathologist's office to do some testing to see could I eat or drink now? Had I done enough work to pass the test? Um, and they put you in a room. They do a moving X-ray as they feed you certain things, and they watch whether it goes down the right way, your esophagus, or goes into your trachea, your airway. And I failed, and so I was just on a stretcher in the hallway, waiting for someone to come and take me back up to my room, and just sobbing. Um, so the the mental struggle,
Mm.
I was never diagnosed, but I feel comfortable calling it depression. Um, that was very real through all of it, but I was still very determined to do what I could. I've always been stubborn. My wife would tell you. Um, but if I was going to be there in the hospital, I was going to do everything that I could to get out as quick as I could. So yeah, it was a battle for sure.
How did that change your attitude during that when you said when you had your self-diagnosed depression?
I had to become more gracious with myself. Uh, I'm used to being a high performer, or at least putting my best into everything. I'm the oldest child of five, so I think oldest child syndrome plays into it. Uh, but recovering perfectionist, always did pretty well in school, built and scaled my own coaching business. I'm a physiotherapist, like I said at the start of the show. I left the clinic and went full time into my own online coaching business, and supported my family that way because my wife doesn't work currently. So I'm always used to just going pedal to the metal and getting it done. So I was forced to be okay, or at least accept that I couldn't do that in the same way in the hospital and through the recovery process. And I needed to make space to process some of those feelings. When I got out of the hospital, I had worked with a mental health professional, a counselor, before all this had happened. Um, did what we wanted to do, and then stopped. So I called him up again. And a large part of what I needed to do was like process the grief, because again, I was a different person when I woke up. So it forced me to increase my understanding and giving myself some of that grace while still working hard um, to get back.
Yeah, I can't imagine it. Like I've touch wood. I've been lucky enough to sort of get through most of my life without any major disasters happening. But yeah, I imagine that is quite a quite a toll on the brain and the emotional and mental battle that you have, especially when it's something that you can't control. It's not it's nothing that you've done, and yeah, I suppose you're looking at it. I suppose you can look at it two ways, really. You've obviously got the victim, the victimised thing, or that right, this is what we've got on our plate, so let's just deal with it and we'll figure it out. So talk, obviously you're coming off the back end of it now, like you get, like you said, you got the nod that we're not going back towards it. So weightlifting, then you mentioned obviously you've got a competition coming up soon. Do you want to talk us through that and talk us, your preparations and whatnot?
Yeah, would love to. I could talk all day about weightlifting and powerlifting. So yeah, first competition back will be May 25th. I actually signed up for 2, excuse me, May 25th and then August 10th. I may try to squeak a third one in towards later in the year, November, December, but we'll see. Yeah, so I've competed 3 times myself. I've been a coach since 2016, just starting to coach some friends, but I've coached now, both myself and then also the team that I've assembled and who works with me and for me. Coach lifters all the way up to the world level, all the way from total beginners to national level and world level competitors. So I love everything about the sport. And the last competition I did was 2019. I had one for 2020, but the world had other plans.
No excuses.
So, yeah. So I've had the itch to compete for a while, but then the focus was really on scaling my coaching business first, and then all this happened in 2023. So as I got back into what felt like regular training, I knew I wanted to just jump in. I don't really have any expectations as far as numbers that I'll hit on the platform. I'm going to do the best that I can, but really the hope is just to get on the platform, get some competition numbers back up there, and just keep getting better and compete 2 to 3 times a year, ideally, just because it helps to develop a lot of skills that you can only really truly practice by competing. You can do some in the gym, but
Yeah. So what does that look like then? Because like I said earlier, like I'm quite a newbie into sort of doing sort of powerlifting type weightlifting when I'm at the gym, so to speak. So how does that look for like when you go to meet? Like what is there certain weights that you have to be sort of at to be at that meet, and like how does it all work? I honestly have no idea.
Yeah. I used to think that you had to be a certain level of strength to compete, and a lot of people do. But what I found, both by doing my first meet and then having competed since, continued to coach, there really is no strength level that you have to be at. Powerlifting is a weight class based sport. So, whatever you weigh, that's going to kind of dictate what class you compete in. But I went to my first meet. It was on a Saturday morning at this big warehouse gym, and there were these big, strong guys and girls in sweaters and track pants, and they looked like they could eat me if they wanted. They were some of the nicest people that I've come across, and they helped me a ton because they knew I was new, and that's part of what hooked me. The community for one, plus just the adrenaline rush you get by getting up there and doing your best, and you get the shakes from the adrenaline sometimes. So yeah, I've just really come to see, and I love to say, if powerlifting and competing in powerlifting is ever a thing somebody wants to do, just go to a meet, see how it looks, how it feels and sounds, and then sign up for one and just see if you like it. Because the worst that happens is you don't, and at least you tried it, and that's fine. But a lot of people get bit by the bug. So yeah, it's fun.
Mm. What you said then is it directly correlates to jiu-jitsu as well. Like the higher you go up in the belts, the nicer the people are on the whole. I mean, like at my academy at ACT JJ UK. Shout out to Junior and the boys. Like everyone there is super nice. Like we got into it for my daughter, as you might have heard if you've listened to her previous episodes. I'm sorry if people are getting bored by this. Yeah, so I started because of my daughter. I wanted her to get into it because she'll be looking to go uni in a few years, and she's 13, but she wants to be a psychologist. So we're full steam ahead on that one. And yeah, so I was freaking out a little bit. She could be anywhere in the country or even abroad at university, and she's not very sort of street savvy. So I was like, well, if she's got that in her pocket, I'll sleep a bit easier at night.
Yeah.
And yeah, and like now it's just like they're all, her big brothers and uncles and, all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, and everyone's just super nice. Everyone works with her well, like, and understands her limitations and all the rest of it. And yeah, it just couldn't be more welcoming. And I think that is why, one of the reasons why she loves it so much, because she's got a few friends there now, like a couple of older girls and some of the women, obviously, and that. And then, yeah, and then, like I say, like her uncles and stuff like that now. So, yeah, she loves it. So, at the meets then, again, I probably should just, probably look this up. But while I've got you here.
Yeah.
So, at the meets, what sort of lifts do you do? Is it like a squat, bench, deadlift, or is there just bench press meets? Is there just deadlift meets? Like how does it work?
Yes to all of it. So it depends a little bit on the federation that you compete in. But IPF, International Powerlifting Federation, in general, especially in Europe, it's typically IPF, and then there are some non-IPF federations. IPF tends to have like full power or quote unquote true powerlifting meets, which is always squat, bench press, deadlift in that order all the time, and bench press only. There are other federations, I believe probably in the UK or just in Europe in general, and certainly over in North America, where they have push-pull meets, just bench press and deadlift. They have still bench only. They have deadlift only. So you can really pick your flavor, however you want to go.
Okay. So for this meet then, what are you expecting to sort of pull or push?
So we're kind of gauging that now. My best deadlift in competition is, I think, 473 pounds. And I'm working on my pound to kilo conversions. It is getting better.
Just divide it by 2.2.
215 kilos is what we're looking at.
Okay. So how is that? How much are you weighing in for the event?
Right now, what was I this morning? It was 177 pounds. So 80 and a half kilos. I'm probably going to register as a 90 kilo competitor just so I can keep gaining weight, which I'm doing right now. And I don't have to worry about like, am I at the limit? It's like 82.5, I think is the next one before, there's the one before 90 kilos. I went into the hospital weighing 193 pounds and I was competing as a 93 kilo lifter. So that's probably what I'll do.
So what's the limitations then on like straps, belts, bodysuits, all of it, none of it, half of it, some of it?
Kind of depends. So straps you're not allowed to use for any powerlifting competition. If you get into strongman, you can use straps there, but for wrapping around the bar, that's not allowed. Belts are allowed in almost all federations. I think there's one in the United States that doesn't allow you to use any belts, but the vast majority do. You can use wrist wraps, especially on bench press. Some people use them on squats. That's fine. You can use like knee sleeves, neoprene knee sleeves for squatting, depending again on federation, especially if you get into equipment or quote unquote geared lifting. People will compete with wraps, knee wraps instead of the sleeves. And that does help your squat, but it's a different beast. And you can put on suits, a squat suit, a bench shirt, a deadlift suit. And then even those have levels and flavors. You can do single ply, multiply. So there's different strokes. You can kind of go any way you want to with it.
So what stroke are you?
I'm a quote unquote raw lifter. So knee sleeves, belt, wrist wraps. Haven't gotten into the knee wraps or the squat suit, bench shirt, that sort of thing yet, but it is on my hit list.
Okay, so is that they're like the levels up? Are they? Is that where you're shifting big tin?
Less levels up, more like they're side by side. There are some lifters. My business partner, his name is John. He's based in the States, and he competes both raw, so without those particular supportive equipment, and equipped. Um, so a lot of equipped lifters, and I think actually there are more people lately, especially as powerlifting has grown in popularity and a lot with social media. Equipped lifting has become a little bit more popular. So there are people who may start with equipped lifting, or they start raw and get into equipped and they train both. Um, so yeah, it kind of is all over, but raw, just the belt and the knee sleeves and the wrist wraps, that's probably the most common.
Right. Okay. So how does your week what does your week look like leading up to the competition? And are you on like a 12-week training plan leading up to it, and then obviously we'll be tapering off towards the end of it? And what sort of lifts are you doing? What are you looking to to give you that edge?
Always looking for the edge.
That's it.
So yeah, what are we now? 10 and a half weeks out. So we, my business partner, John, and one of my other coaches who works for me, I trusted them to help me with both the rehab process, because it was another head trip being a coach and a physiotherapist and needing to do physiotherapy myself through the hospital and out of the hospital. So Dave is the other coach. He's also a physical therapist. He helped me just because I didn't want to be my own patient. I was trash at being my own patient. So the two of them, they do my programming. We keep kind of a general plan for certainly the 12 weeks leading up to the meet. We tend to probably go in 4 to 6 week chunks or blocks. And day to day, I'm squatting twice a week. I'm deadlifting twice a week, along with a couple other like deadlift accessories. I'm bench pressing 3 times. And then there's other like quote bodybuilding accessories, because that's another thing that I'm trying to do, gain weight and build back that muscle that all kind of got wasted away in the hospital.
So when you're deadlifting, when you say you're doing it twice a week, how heavy are you going with that?
Usually one day is going to be heavier, one day is going to be a little lighter. Um, the main deadlift day is my second day of the week. And it, so we also have the case where last week I did, because we're starting off the prep, sets of 3 at not a super easy, but not a super heavy weight. This week on the same day, I worked up to a heavier single repetition. So week to week on that day, we kind of change the exposure between some rep work and some heavy exposure. The other day of the week for deadlifting, again, a little bit lighter. It's right now it's pause deadlifts to really focus on uh, locking in the technique while also getting a little extra work in.
I only asked that because I was watching something on Instagram the other day with Eddie Hall, and he was talking about he got to when he was going through his deadlift journey, obviously up to the 500 kilograms. He got to 425 and he was stuck on 425 for, I think he said 6 months. So it was a long time anyway. He was racing up, adding, I think he said, a kilogram or 2 kilograms every time pretty much, and he was just bam, 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 jumping up. Got to 425 and was stuck at it for ages. And he said that he did a load of research into it, and he reckons that after a heavy deadlift, if you're going like to near your max effort, your body takes 10 days to recover.
Yeah, I think we saw the same video. And
you could have jumped in at any point and said you've seen it.
No, I wanted people to hear it because I love talking about it. So what Eddie said also seems to be supported by both anecdotes from high level lifters in strongman, powerlifting, that sort of thing, and also in the research around fatigue. So in general, especially as lifters get bigger, male, female, it doesn't matter as much, but as they get bigger and lift heavier absolute weights, like more weight on the bar,
Mm.
the amount of work they have to do has to go down just because the stress on the body from lifting that much goes up because they're stronger. Absolutely. And so they tend to have to do less volume, tend to need more time between heavy deadlift exposures. Certainly, if talking about Eddie Hall, especially his record's 500 kilos, if I remember right.
Mm. Yep.
Um, so, from the 425, 900 plus pounds, uh, yeah, you're going to need some more time than, say, somebody who still may be experienced in training, but has a smaller, they're smaller, absolutely. They weigh less, they're moving, they have less weight on the bar, even though relatively it still might be close to their max. But yeah, 10 to 14, even up to 21 days is kind of the range that a lot of powerlifters will take their last heavy deadlift before meet. They might still deadlift between that, but lighter, but to drop some of the
Yeah.
fatigue and be ready to go heavy on
Yeah.
meet day.
And keep the muscles going.
Yeah.
So what does your nutrition look like going in? Do you start sort of ramping up the calories going into the meet, or are you at sort of a high, 10 weeks out now, so you wouldn't be yet. So yeah, so again, what does that look like? Obviously it's going to mirror your workouts, I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
But what does the calories a day look like? Are you strictly watching your food? Do you have cheat days here and there? Like how does your nutrition look?
Yeah. So my goal right now is slowly gain weight. I could gain weight faster than I am. I'm aiming for on average, point point 0.7 pounds per week or so. Um, Based on what I've seen from experts in sports science and nutrition, people like Lane Norton, Greg Nuckols, other people who I really enjoy learning from. 0.5 pounds per week, give or take, is a good rate of gain where you'll still be in enough of a caloric surplus to gain muscle. But if you start gaining more than, say, a pound a week, 2 pounds a week, you're likely just putting on a lot of body fat, which you may not really want. So, yeah, trying to stay in a caloric surplus. I use an app. I've never met Lane Norton. I saw him once at IPF Masters Worlds when I was coaching my lifter. There was a banquet after the competition. Lane had just won his class, and Team USA was sitting over here, and I was at the Team Finland table, and I almost went up to ask for a picture, but I figured I'd let him enjoy his dinner. But he has an app called Carbon Diet Coach. Really helpful app. I'm not paid by them, but I put in my goals. I just track my food. I've tracked my food ever since the bodybuilding days. I use a food scale. Not everybody needs that. Not all of my clients use that, but it's not a big problem for me. And track my food. I weigh myself pretty well daily, and then week to week it'll adjust the macros and calories so that we're gaining at a steady rate.
Okay. So what sort of foods are you eating then? What do you sort of prioritize, and what's your go-to meals?
I'm a creature of habit. So for breakfast, I just tend to like to have a smoothie, some whey protein. I'll put some blueberries in there, some oats, um, some peanut butter. I put my creatine monohydrate in there just so I remember to take it. And then again, my wife, God bless her, she makes sure I eat vegetables through the day. So at lunch, it's probably like a cabbage salad with some sort of meat or fish. And then dinner is kind of whatever she makes. So it can vary a whole bunch, but yeah, really trying to make sure protein's there. I've eaten some vegetables through the day, drink enough water, and then beyond that, it's kind of whatever fits.
Cool. What's going on there? So, what's my next question? What would you say to someone that is looking to get into into powerlifting? Like, how would you suggest to go about it?
I mean, obviously I'm biased. Anybody who's listening to me at this point knows I have that heavy bias, but I think it's incredible. Not only because it saved my life in a very direct way last year, but it also changed my life in positive ways before that. So as far as how to go about it, there's a lot of really great sources of information out there. some of whom I've mentioned before, Lane Norton, Greg Knuckles, um, people like Kristen Dunsmore. You can find all these people on YouTube or Instagram, uh, the YouTube channel Renaissance Periodization. These are places I would start, and I could list off a whole bunch more of men and women who are putting out great information. But just honestly, probably going to a powerlifting meet if you can, just to watch, will give you an understanding of how the competition side goes. Um, for training, again, some of these resources or books that some of those authors have put out are a great starting point. Really, it's just kind of typical barbell training, starting to learn the squat, bench press, deadlift, probably doing some sort of back training, something for your shoulders and legs, and just trying to get stronger and in general, larger and more muscular over time. And then if people have access to it or they're interested in it, linking up with either a coach formally, especially one who you can talk to. One of my hills that I'll die on is if you're going to make the investment of your trust and your money and your time to work with a coach, the coach should be willing to talk to you beforehand before you've agreed to, you know, put any of those things on the table, just to see, do they work with people like you? Do you get along personality wise? And at this point, especially with the internet being what it is, there's a ton of access to people all over, whether locally or abroad. I mean, I work with people in Finland and Australia and Dubai and Canada, the United States. Thinking about one lifter in England currently. But yeah, trying to find somebody who does what you're looking to do, who seems forthcoming and you get along with, or at least if you've got some friends who know what they're doing, you know, are willing to show you the ropes. I think those are all viable places to kind of start. And everyone's journey looks a little different, but I think those are good places.
How did you get into being a coach? At what point did you realise, like from just training and doing powerlifting, to then thinking, actually, I think I can coach this?
Uh, it started. It started earlier than I would have probably guessed it would. Uh, so I've always been into, well, since starting to train and then being a massive geek, I started to learn about strength and conditioning, and that continued all the way through university. And then after physical therapy school, I moved to uh, a city a bit east of Toronto. And at the gym that I trained at, I met a friend. There were a few powerlifters, competitive powerlifters, and one of them, his name was Conrad. He and I became friends, and then we started. We actually, sorry, trying to remember the timeline. One of our other friends, his name is Nick. He was a bodybuilder. He actually competed, and he said, "Look, if you and Conrad ever start doing coaching, you got to let me know." And that's what we ended up doing. And Nick was the first guy to sign up. So that was back at the end of 2015, I want to say 15, 15 or 16, one of the two. And then we started with a small roster of people. Conrad knew people from his university days. And then that's kind of how I cut my teeth on top of learning, competing. And then I kept a small roster of folks. Conrad and I, parted ways on the coaching side and kept a roster of 3 to 5 lifters. But in March of 2020, when the world shut down and my clinic shut down too, I decided I wanted to scale the coaching business up, especially with the help of my now business partner, John, our mentor, Frank. So just kind of put the pedal down and then really put the focus there. And now our combined roster is up to like 105, and we're still growing.
Good, brilliant. So what advice would you give to, like general advice would you give to anyone out there? Life, getting over, getting past trauma, but anything like that.
I would say come back to your why, and the why might change. I think about what kept me going through those times, like in the hospital bed, in the hallway, or just crying because I didn't pass the test, to eat. the days where my wife and kids couldn't come to visit me and I just really wanted to be home, my why was to get back to them. And that was solid enough reason for me to, kind of get through the muck and deal with the hard stuff. Didn't stop being hard. Excuse me. But it just made it really clear what I was willing to do and put up with. The other thing I'd say for anyone going through hard stuff, whether it's in life or in any circumstance, as much as you can or are willing to, lean on people that you can trust. And it might be one other person, it might be two, it might be 10. But I, as a recovering perfectionist, again, oldest child syndrome, all the things, I've always been used to, at default, just doing it myself, try not to complain, try not to ask for help, because it seemed like asking for help was weakness. I've changed my mind on that completely, where you have to be courageous enough to ask for help in certain circumstances. And I wasn't ready to at certain points. I am now. I'm much more willing to do it. So, for anybody who's going through it, it's not, I would say it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's actually a brave thing and can lead to some pretty important changes for the better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Definitely. Right. Well, sadly, that brings us to the end of the episode. Would you like to give everyone your socials and how they can get in contact with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, Instagram is probably the best place to come find me. Jared.unbreakablestrength is the handle. I'm an open book. So if any questions you have about either my journey or about powerlifting training, like I said, I could talk about that stuff all day long. So shoot me a message. That's the best place. I'm on Facebook, but Instagram, and I'm also on TikTok, but Instagram is going to be the best place, and you'll find all the stuff you need to there.
Perfect. A lad at the gym said to me today, actually, I showed him your video that you were coming on here, and he said he was, I'll follow him on TikTok.
Yes, that's awesome.
Okay.
Please thank him for me. We're trying to get the TikTok up a little bit, but
I did say to him that I would squeeze it in the episode, so I got it right in at the end.
Got it.
So shout out to Adam. Right, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today, Jared. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear from you. Obviously, tragic story, a lot of trauma in that period of your life, but for you to come out the other side of it and go from strength to strength, quite literally, as well as mentally. Is an absolute inspiration and a journey I think that a lot of people can learn from and take a lot from it. So thank you very much for your time.
Happy to, Jack. Thanks for the invitation, man. I loved it. If there's ever a round 2 that we want to do, let me know. And at some point, I'm sure I have a goal to hop across the pond. So maybe our paths will cross there.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. I'll look forward to it. Well, thank you very much, everybody.